Hi again, Samuel Andrews, Christianity and Anti-Christianity and their final conflict. This chapter is the initial stage of the falling away. Having spoken of the nature of the falling away and of its origin in the loss of the first love, let us consider its bearings first on the relation of the church to her head as affecting the exercise of his headship, and second, on her relation to the Holy Ghost as affecting the fulfillment of his office in her, and third, on her relation to the world as set to prepare the way for the return of its king and the establishment of his kingdom. First, the headship of Christ is affected in its exercise by the loss of the first love. When we recall the nature of the Lord's headship as already set forth, we cannot well doubt that it was in the purpose of God in constituting this vital relation that he exalted into the heaven and set as head of the church should continue to bear witness to himself before the world by his acting in it and through it. Thus acting and putting into full exercise his prerogatives as the head, it would be impossible for the world to ignore or deny him, and his headship would be manifested more and more plainly as the church grew in grace and strength. As the living Lord, he must be the central figure in its history. But if hindered in the exercise of his headship and hidden from view, men first ignore and then deny his official place and supremacy, and finally question his personal existence. We have then to ask how the ascended Lord could prove to the world through the church, and not only his continued personal existence in heaven as the risen one, but also his official power and authority. Of both these the world may rightly demand proof. The death of Jesus being universally known and unquestioned, the fact to be proved first of all was his resurrection. Must this proof be limited to the testimony of those disciples who saw him after he was raised from the dead? It need not be said that this proof, however convincing at the first, becomes weaker with the lapse of years and demands corroboration. This corroboration has been found by many, and rightly found, in the existence and history of the church. Its existence proves both his existence and, in a measure, also his authority. The church is a living witness to a living head. Neither her continued existence nor her history can be explained if we deny his headship. Still, we know that the fact of his resurrection, and therefore of his headship, is doubted by many who profess and call themselves Christians. The history of the church, they say, may prove continual divine help and guidance, but so does Jewish history. And religious systems may be vigorous long after their founders are dead, as we see in Mohammedanism. Because Christianity exists, we may not say that Jesus personally lives and has any present functions. It holds its place upon its ethical merits. He lives in his principles and example. But such an explanation of the continued existence and progress of Christianity is satisfactory to no thoughtful mind. If Jesus had not risen from the dead and ascended to heaven, and does not still live, Christianity as a religion would long since have lost its distinctive character. Whilst thus the church, as a visible body and in every right form of its activity, bears continued witness to its head as living in heaven, we still ask, how can his headship be so manifested that the world everywhere shall know it? The answer is, in the unity of the rule and administration of the church as one whole, thus manifesting a personal will controlling all. Beholding the church, composed of men of all races, of the most diverse classes, gathered from discordant religious faiths, its members scattered all over the earth, yet all united under one authority, not a multitude of little independent communities, but one great community, with common ordinances and rites of worship, and all acting in harmony to one common end. The world must ask, how is this unity of administration and action obtained? We see every proof of the control of one personal will, yet there is no one visible personal ruler. There must be somewhere a center of authority, or such widely dispersed and discordant elements could not act in unity. We see diverse kinds of ministries, some of universal and some of local jurisdiction. Who is it that sets these various ministers in their places and defines their official relations and makes them to work together in harmony? To these questions the Church can answer: we are under the control of one personal will. We have a head, but he is in heaven. We do not see him, but he has those among us who are chosen by him and who act for him, both in the Church universal and in the local churches. To these, as his ministers, clothed with his authority, we render obedience. We are one because we have one head and Lord, and act in unison because his will is one. This is the visible proof which the Church, fully united to her head and obedient to him, should always have given to the world of his existence and authority, of the Spirit of truth dwelling in the Church, the internal bond of unity. The Lord said, "The world seeth him not, nor knoweth him." It is not his holiness and truth revealed through the Church, but the unity of administration through the head, which the world can see and know. This is all according to John 17, verse 21. On his part, such proof is simply the exercise of his headship. The prerogative of the appointment of his ministers lies in the nature of his office as the head, and cannot be separated from it. It had been exercised by him in the choice of the 12 apostles, and later of St. Paul. Whether he called them personally or by the Holy Ghost, there was the definite expression of his will as to those who should serve him, both in the higher and the lower ministries. The voice of the Holy Ghost through prophets designating them, as in the case of Timothy. As he himself was called of God to his ministry as high priest, so no man could hold priestly office in his church who was not called by him. And only through those who thus called could he put forth the fullness of his power. Such was the order of God in the Church at the first in establishing the headship of Christ. The head, personally, or through the Holy Ghost, made known who should officially serve under him and teach and rule his people. And thus unity of doctrine and of administration was preserved, and to the world a visible witness was borne, both of his existence and authority. Whatever the moral attitude of the world toward the Church, it could not deny the fact of his headship and rule in it. And then he heads into, but a few years later we see all changed. Indeed. I'll put in a link to how future president of the Watchtower, Fred Franz, once exploded the governing body doctrine of the religion he served. And of course, his explosion was not printed in the Watchtower. So we'll put in Ray Franz's account of how this all happened back in the decade of the 70s, when there was some fresh air blowing through the Watchtower world. See you next time.